Ben Brugler holds the titles of President and CEO of akhia. He previously held the titles of President and Vice President before being transitioned into his current position in 2018. Under Ben's leadership, the agency has grown from 15 to more than 60 employees, earning a spot as a top 100 workplace in Northeast Ohio, as well as placement on the Weatherhead 100 list of fastest growing companies in the region. With more than 15 years of experience in the industry, Ben is well known among clients and the regional business community as a master facilitator and speaker on topics ranging from content marketing to thought leadership positioning. In 2011, he was named to Crane's 40 Under 40 for his contributions to akhia's growth. So we're super excited to have Ben with us today. Shout out on the 40 Under 40. We are on the Fort Worth Inc., Fort Worth Magazine, Fort Worth Inc.'s 40 Under 40. So
nice, congratulations.
We're in good company here. We're all
well, enjoy the 40 Under 40 tag while you can. It's I no longer qualify for that, but I made a point as long as I could to tell people especially emphasis on the under.
Okay. Yeah. Well, you just motivated and inspired me to do more of that. So because
put it on your business card.
Yeah, I only have a few years left to be able to say that. So, but so excited to have you here. We got to hear Ben speak at the NACWA Strategic Communications Conference in June this year, and I ran across the ballroom after he was done and said, "Oh my gosh, we need to chat." So, but before we get into that, our old boss at the last utility we worked for, he started as a field guy and is now the director of the water utility that he started out. So I feel like you have a very similar started from the bottom, now you're here story at akhia. And, looking over at your topics that you speak on, which include things like business integration, internal comms, work-life balance, these are all areas to me that really speak to the importance of the culture of a workplace. So speaking from experience, what is it about akhia that has kept you engaged there throughout your career?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on here.
You're welcome.
I'm excited. Yeah, I was excited when I met you guys. And I'm pretty lucky because the culture was in place when I started at akhia. And I was the 8th employee. So, we have fluctuated in growth from 20 to 40, from 40 to 30, from 30 to 60, from 60 to 50, as most agencies do. But the culture has really been the thing that's, stayed in place for the most part. And wrapped in that is just the fact that we want to connect with our clients and with employees and with the communities we're working in. Mm-hmm. And so for almost 20 years, I've been fortunate enough, whether it was starting as an account coordinator and having to ask questions and learn from the people at the agency, or now the role I'm in as CEO and talking to other leaders and company leaders and senior members of our clients, just about what's keeping them up at night, challenges they're facing, an opportunity to learn from them. No day is the same. And I know it sounds cliche, but it really does come down to the people. So the fact that we've had that culture built in from the beginning, it's just a different group of people that you're getting to talk to year over year. And we've had great people in and out of our doors and great clients, but that's been the constant. And when you have something like that, it's just a new chance to learn every day.
So I led with that question about culture because I think culture is incredibly important and that speaks a lot to me about the organization that you work for. I talk about our boss because I know that one of the big reasons that he was there was because of the people and because of the culture that were there. And you were speaking on a topic at NACWA as it related to workforce, and that's kind of what we're going to be talking about, that and communications role in that. And so I think that I wanted to lead with culture because I think that that's such an absolute important part of not only bringing people in, but keeping people once we get them there, and, being able to talk about communications role in that. So I thought that was really cool that you have grown with your company because you don't really see that a lot more. So I wanted to take a minute and let you kind of share a little bit about that story with us. So.
Yeah, I'm glad you did. Yeah, I love talking about that. And it's hard. I mean, retention's hard. I know we're going to get into that a little bit later, but the good news is with Gen Z, I think that we're seeing the reversal of some retention trends, which I know something you and I have hit on, but that's, I think, something we're going to start to see more of, which is why it's so important for companies to have these cultures in place.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, just recently, our friend Megan Yu Schneider, shout out, commented on LinkedIn that we, as in the water industry, need to stop talking about preparing for the next gen and then reference millennials. Millennials are already here, and the word has become ubiquitous with the younger generations. Mm-hmm. So that was exactly what you were talking about at NACWA presentation about this Gen Z. Mm-hmm. So who is Gen Z?
Who is Gen Z?
Who are you?
Who is Gen Z? So funny thing, before we get into who's Gen Z, so you mentioned about next generation, then millennials.
Yeah.
And I'm going to forget who told me this, so I won't try and sort. I didn't say it, but somebody I was talking to Gen Z about said, when people are talking about generations, they still reference millennials and think millennials are like 20-somethings. And it's like, no, we're in our 30s. We have kids. Like, we're not. And so then somebody else jumped in and said, yeah, it just basically proves the point that the next generation doesn't like the young kids. It's like those young kids, that younger generation. And it's the same thing with millennials. And they've received, like, they've probably been beat up the worst of any generation.
Oh, yeah.
Just because at first they were like, these millennials. Then it was like, millennials are killing everything. And now they don't even get the credit they deserve as like being a maturing generation.
Tackling debt, populating the world.
Life's real, man. I mean, take it from a Gen Z. Or take it from Gen X. So you have Gen Z now, and Gen Z is like this huge gap. And I'm going to get into that in a second. It's almost like this 22-year generation. It's like, how do you just lump everybody together? Because the oldest of Gen Z is now starting to get into the workforce at 22. And whereas the youngest is like this digitally native generation, like basically maybe my 9-year-old or even younger. I have a 9 and a 13-year-old, and they both kind of say the same thing. We were talking earlier about Wi-Fi being out. It's like, what do we do now? And it recently came out. I put it in my newsletter. I don't know if you guys saw it last week, that it's just broke about this Gen Alpha, which is like a sub segment within Gen Z, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, we're back at A.
We are. And they totally own it as Alpha's the beginning.
Oh, boy.
But it's like, you can't just have this 20-year generation here. You have to have some breakouts. So like now 9 and under are like these Gen Alphas, which are basically like,
oh boy,
the really scary ones that are going to rule everything because they have no fear of anything digital or tech.
Oh my God. That's my children.
Yeah. So this is where AI comes in, and like now we're going to be like iRobot, and okay.
Oh yeah. Nothing phases.
Except mine. Mine will be weird because they're on a farm and there's no internet.
Well,
he was like, oh, that is weird.
Let's not get too crazy here. No, but the thing is like the Gen Z has, they kind of will bring balance to the force, little nerd speak there. But the thing is that they are, because they aren't, I think people were afraid of like how they were going to grow up on screens and be completely disconnected and detached. But in reality, it's actually helped them try to, they understand about balancing it because they've grown up with parents looking at their phones. Guilty. I've done that. People maybe, like, for me, my generation was wear your seatbelt. Now it's texting and driving. So to today, there's no way I would have worn my seatbelt. It's a fact. Yeah. Whereas they're going to be like, why would I be on my phone when I'm driving? Like, it's kind of carried up. So they've learned how to balance it. And it's really interesting because they're starting to take some of these older school tactics and blend them with like newer technology and newer ways of doing things. And that's really going to impact the workforce a lot, I think. Whereas the hang up with millennials were, well, they're entitled and we have to talk to them about their career path and everything else. Well, I never really saw that as a bad thing because you want engaged employees, but so be it. Whereas Gen Z is coming in saying, yeah, I already know. I'm here to work. I'm here to stay. I'm here to learn. Just tell me what I need to do. Point me in the right direction. And then they'll hold you accountable. So it's going to completely change, I think, the way people work. And in some cases, the culture, because we talked earlier about having that culture established. Now, if it's not established, you're going to lose a whole generation.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And to go to your point already where to go to the initial point that we talked about how especially in our industry, we hear still a lot of talk about millennials and the incoming. Like, I think in your presentation, you said that even by next year in 2020, like 20% of the workforce is already going to be Gen Z. And so again, like they're already here. So like, let's start figuring this out.
The oldest are here. The 22-year-olds, and it'll play into, I know we're going to talk later about education and training, but it's going to play into, you might even have people in the workforce earlier than before, which is something we haven't had to deal with. I mean, not tremendously early, but the fact is some of these kids are looking at 2-year programs to get into the workforce faster, and they're putting the onus on the companies and the businesses to continue their training. They're like, let me get hired, you train me, it's on you to provide these programs, but I'm going to be the one really learning and running with it. So even that's going to change.
Yeah, I'm really excited to get to that part.
Yeah, that would make sense for, well, I'll wait then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know, I'm jumping ahead.
Just getting excited.
Go down some tangents. So in your presentation, you walked us through 4 of the biggest myths surrounding Gen Z. Which one stands out to you the most, or maybe which one was the most surprising for you to learn?
It probably the same answer for both. It's the third one I referenced, which is Gen Z will only communicate on digital channels.
Yes.
Which is like, hey, how's that true? Because we just said that they grew up digitally native. But the fact is, and I have some of the stats in that I was going to reference if it came up. But the thing is, because of what I said about they've grown up with their parents, on devices a lot, and of course they're used to it in the classroom. That's actually reversed it a little bit, whereas they see that as this invasion of privacy for them. So they look at it as more like, if I need to use it, I'll use it between these hours, but then on my own time, I'm going to be a lot more private and a lot more guarded with my information, because I grew up in like, this is being hacked, that's being hacked. And there's a softer side to it too, and I'll just read from the presentation. But there's a softer side because this generation is recognizing that what this could potentially do to their soft skills, meaning like the people skills and things that we need today. So they look at the stat was 37% of this generation where that technology is weakening their ability to maintain these interpersonal relationships and develop good people skills. And when you flip that and look at it the other way, 74% want to communicate face-to-face versus in-office tools like Yammer or Slack and some of the other messaging, Skype, those types of programs that millennials really brought into the workforce. And I use Slack a ton. So, I'm like, oh, geez, now I have to go talk to people. I just got used to not talking to people.
I really like Slack.
I do love Slack. But that's, I think, what was most surprising to me when it comes to how they were going to use those channels. And it actually goes hand in hand with something I was just reading about today, where how they're being recruited into the industry or into the workforce. They actually have a greater awareness, and people probably even twice their age, meaning my generation, maybe Gen Y, about the stuff they're putting out on social media, and the fact that, people can go and look at that. And that's an alarming number for people in the workforce today trying to like clean their social profiles. So that awareness, I think, is also leading them to be a little more reluctant with the digital channels.
Sure. I mean, we've seen it in our own like personal.
I have a 13-year-old daughter, so God, please don't encourage it yet.
I'm with you.
We've seen it with some of our friends that are in the early 20s or mid 20s, where we're like, why aren't you on social media? Why aren't you on Twitter? Why aren't you on, LinkedIn or whatever? And they're just like, nah, man, I'm not into that. Not going to be on Snapchat, not going to be anywhere. And you're just like, I'm like, how are you functioning? How do you know where to go and what to do? And they're just like,
well, they do the real time. They do like, like Yik Yak and stuff like that. The next one's already come out, but
they said they liked the WhatsApp,
like they all have text threads and stuff.
Okay.
They're like, I want to choose who I want to talk to. And if I want to talk to them, then I'm going to text this person and I'm going to talk to them that way, which is, more direct, which is ironic because I feel like as I'm sitting on these member associations or things like this where we're trying to engage with the younger audience, and they're like, got to get on social, got to get on this, got to make sure that we're everywhere, and they're like, they're not even there, they don't even care.
Right. No, they don't.
Yeah.
And they want to talk to you because they know that's basically a more direct way of getting information. Now they may use digital channels, and they're very self-taught.
Yeah. But yeah, the myths were something that really stood out to me in your presentation. But there was also something else that I felt incredibly positive about, was that Gen Z wants to work for a place where they can have multiple roles within one place of employment. So for me, that was super exciting because in water, like, we have something for everyone. You know, we say that we're the industry, whether you have a GED or a PhD, we got something for you. Whether inside, outside, whatever you want to do. So we know we have that going for us at least. But what are some other characteristics that Gen Z are looking for in employers that may be wins for our industry too? And I think you kind of started to touch on them with the education piece.
Yeah. So actually, and I think I even said in my presentation and when we met, is this was an industry I didn't have a lot of knowledge of. And so two things. One, doing some of the research ahead of time, just looking at some of the labor issues and shortages you guys were preparing to face was similar to ones that our clients have. It's just yours is even a bigger gap from my perspective. The second thing, though, was I was able to see other presentations on that panel. And while I was waiting to join the panel, I was walking around talking to people and just seeing like different tabletops and stuff like that. And there was so much focused on education and development and training, and really making sure that people felt like they understood the purpose and what they were doing and the larger mission and strategy of the job they had. And it was one of the video presentations, I think, on the panel I was on, about just how much work's going into training and development for not just entry-level employees, but recruiting at the high school and the career tech level to get people into that field, which I think you guys are doing a really good job of, because like you said, you have a lot to offer and a lot to learn in, but you're not averse, or it's not new to try and look at how you're doing these training programs. Especially, I think the one I saw was a video game, and the stats support that. I have some of them up here. Is so nearly 60% of Gen Z view YouTube as the preferred method of learning. So the fact is it readily available? Can they go find it? Is it already in a format they understand? This is a generation that might value credentials and training certificates more than even a degree, because that means they've succeeded and thrived at their job.
Yeah.
So they're being established there, which I know your industry definitely has, in terms of the different types of technicians and training and roles that are available. We did do some work for a utilities monitoring company where that was something that they were really working on from a training standpoint. And then you guys also, it seemed like there were a lot of boot camp certification programs like that this generation really values. Mm-hmm. And then, as we mentioned earlier, just about where the onus is on the need for reskilling, which was a word that kind of popped up a lot when I was researching this presentation, and I really liked, is understanding all the different ways that can impact the company, which you mentioned earlier. But this is a generation that is expecting it. So it's not, boomers, Gen X, millennials, they might see the onus more on the organization of like, train me, develop my path, whereas Gen Z is coming in expecting it. So the hardest part you're going to have to do is make sure it's readily available, because they're ready for it. If you don't have it, that's when you're going to have the issue, which is completely opposite of what we've been dealing with from a generational standpoint. So everything I saw, heard, and have read about in the weeks past and leading up to giving the presentation was, this is an industry that's really pretty focused on making sure the continuous training and development is a part of the job.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's kind of a two-way thing there. Like it makes me excited that this generation kind of has this different view on education, where you don't just have to get a degree in order to have a successful career. And there's so many different pathways and opportunities within the industry that you can kind of come in at any level, and kind of work your way up and around through just this web of opportunities that there are. And so I think we need to remember that and to capitalize on that. But also, to speak to your point, I think from an internal perspective, we need to be incredibly mindful of the fact that they want this and they're thirsty for that. And so don't just stick them in a silo somewhere and say, well, see you in 20 years or whatever, 30 years or whatever. Like, cross-train them, send them places, send them to go get training, send them to conferences, invest in those things. Because you could probably literally go to a different water conference of some sort every single day. Not even kidding. There's just something every single day. Yeah. Every week there's a different conference on a different topic or subject matter. And so, make sure that you're putting those things in your budget to invest in your folks and send them places. And if you are worried about like pushback or slack on, what that means, how that looks when you're sending folks to go do that, like have some sort of requirement that when they come back, they have to give some sort of presentation or they have to commit to implementing something that they learned while they were there, or at least like sharing that information and not being Arian's favorite
knowledge hoarders.
Yeah, not being knowledge hoarders.
Right.
Especially for the folks who don't come in your like traditional degree path. Like I loved seeing in your presentation there that Gen Z, the majority of them think that there are alternative ways to get a good education beyond college, and that's 100% true.
So needed
in our industry. Yeah.
It's the perfect storm, and I don't know, that's not the right reference, but it's the perfect rainbow and unicorn situation.
Yeah, it's the perfect rainbow and unicorn.
Because we have such a need for the 18, 19, 20-year-old to come in and start getting trained at a treatment plant immediately, in the distribution system, at a wastewater treatment plant. We need that right now. And so for them to start coming out saying, you know what, I don't think I'm going to go to college. I think I'm going to go get hands-on training and set myself up for a, fulfilling career day one after high school. Like, that's available and that's what we need.
Yeah. And get in and start
and then water's going to save the whole student loan debt.
Yeah. Crisis. I was going to say, get in and then have the utilities start paying for your college education, like don't put yourself in $100,000 in debt before you even get that job, like, come on, we want you.
Yeah. The water's warm. Come on in.
Yeah. Oh, well done. Well done. I like that.
The water's warm.
I thought I was going to be the first one to make a water pun. I love puns.
She's here all week, folks.
Yeah. No, so you guys hit on a couple of really good points, and I think it's worth noting. So Gen Z's parents are Gen X for the most part.
Yeah.
And Gen Y. So we'll say Gen Y, Gen X. And you got to remember when Gen X, Gen Y went to school, which was fresh out of recession. Parents were like, you're going to go for 4 years. I'm not paying for all of them. You're going to learn this. You're going to do that. And you're going to get out and you're going to get a job.
Mm-hmm.
And it was value in education, but then turning that into value in a job. And so a lot of people in my generation whose parents told them that, like you said in the beginning, I got in early and it was never a question of going back for more education or this or that. I was going to rely on working hard, learning the different positions, and it was just a given. I was going to work my way up in that organization. And I think Gen Z seeing that from their parents and hearing that, like, you're going to stop messing around. You don't need to go for 5 or 6 years. You need the degree, and then you're going to work hard and you're going to earn it. Mm-hmm. That's kind of a blending. It's like this version 2.0 of that mentality that we now have, where it's like, that's going to manifest itself in maybe you don't need 4 years. Maybe you need 2 years, a 2-year degree. And like my wife teaches high school marketing students. So she's like, if you know you're going into this, why not go to a specialty college? If you know you're doing this, why not just work straight through summer and get your job and get your degree and be done in 2.5 years? Mm-hmm. And you can join the workforce and join. And so she works out of a career, out of a career center. So she sees the need for a lot of people in this industry. So she's like, why are we even messing around with that?
Yeah.
And I think that's just more of a norm now than it was before. So combined with the fact that they're ready to get in and learn and can be self-taught, is going to lead to, I think it's really good for companies. They have huge opportunities with this workforce. If our economy can hold on here, I think there's some good things ahead, but they see it for the reality that it is.
Yeah. Good.
So, Ben, you're also a little passionate about engaged employees. And turns out employees actually make these great recruiters for your organization. So workforce issues aren't just about recruiting, though. Once you get them in the door, you have to train them, retain them, and the cost is incredibly expensive. There are some shocking numbers out there. I want to know which ones are the most shocking to you.
Well,
kind of scared us.
They were shocking.
Well, it is, right? And the number right now is, I think in the presentation I gave you guys back in June, it was, I'm just checking my facts here. I think it was 12, let's see. So we have 30 billion annually is what turnover's costing our US economy, the US economy. So think about that, 30 billion in turnover alone. And when you combine that with the fact of what we were just saying about positions that are left open or maybe not filled, or there's not enough people to get in and training, that's taking all that into account. Now that number is up even from a few years ago because one, unemployment is low. Two, we have a better gauge on what we're actually able to track and measure in terms of lost productivity. And three, the number of weeks that a job has sat open has gone up. So basically, I think it's gone from like 8 weeks to 12 weeks in the last 3 or 4 years. So an open position can sit open for 12 weeks. And if you think that's 3 months out of a year, what it would cost you to do your job plus one, cost to hire somebody, the interviewing and recruiting process. So all those numbers go into that. That's a huge number that is really impacting the economy in a lot of ways because it's just straight up lost productivity. The other thing is, if you don't have those employees engaged, it's not just what you're losing in terms of by not having them there, it's what you're losing in terms of investing in them and then watching them walk out the door. So a couple of stats and probably what, you guys are talking about some of the numbers that are scary. So 30%, I'll just hit you with a couple of these. 30% of employees leave within the first 6 months of being hired. Which is crazy.
Yeah.
When you think about what goes into onboarding employees, especially in our line of work, right? So we have clients, we're in a service business. I just introduced you to a client and now that person is leaving. So that's a huge impact to business. When you consider engagement and what we're facing today, it says 30 to 40% of employees feel that they aren't engaged at work.
Oh, that makes me so sad.
Well, it is. And you guys started talking about culture. That's a big reason why.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think I just read an article in The Atlantic about when the economy's good, HR's job's a lot of fun because it's all about engaging employees and getting them into the workforce and understanding it. When the economy's bad, HR's job's terrible and relies on process and what we know HR has to do during the downtime. So that's why HR is such a hot position right now, because so many companies are looking for ways to get these employees engaged because that number is so high unengaged. And why that actually matters at the bottom line is because when you have employees that aren't engaged, they cost the company 85% more than an engaged employee.
Incredible.
I 100% believe that.
So basically it costs you twice the amount you're paying somebody to keep them there versus somebody who is engaged and happy in their job.
Yeah, because most people don't leave. Well, in my opinion, most people don't leave a job. They leave a boss or a manager or someone who's toxic who works around them. And life is too short.
Right.
And so, they'd rather leave and go somewhere else. Whereas you might lose some incredibly talented people because it's normally your best and brightest who just don't want to put up with that crap. And now you're left with, these folks who are costing you 85% more than that wonderful person who just left. So
right. Well, what causes that, and you guys would probably appreciate this, just given the line of business you're in. We're in service industry. I mentioned earlier that I get to talk to CEOs and senior leaders at companies and stuff like that. And one of the questions I always ask is, I like asking, how do you know somebody's doing a good job? because there's like so much today about remote workforce, and there's no true offices anymore. And it's like, how do you know somebody's actually working?
Yeah.
And the other thing is, what type of employees do you spend most of your time on? Because, and the answer always comes back, the trouble employees, the ones that need extra management or extra time. And when they hear themselves saying that, they're like, I don't even like saying that, because the reality is they're spending that time on the disengaged employee that may or may not be happy regardless.
Yeah.
And instead of spending it on the engaged employee that can maybe have a greater return to the company, wants a bigger opportunity, and is sitting here saying, hey, I actually like where I work. I want to do a great job. And you're over here spending time over here. What about, hey, let's let you and I talk.
Yeah.
And it always comes back as the case. And I don't know why that always is something, but it's always the same answer. And when you think about how you spend your time in the vein of that stat of, we're 30 to 40% are disengaged with the company they work at, it really forces you to think about how you prioritize your day if you're in management.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it really, for me, speaks volumes of just how important learning better communication skills are, because if you don't have them as a leader or a manager in your organization, I mean, I don't know how you can be successful. Because I think about, you talked about remote working, and I just read an article about that, and it was talking about one of the most important things that a manager has to do is you have to be like explicit about what your expectations are, and like direct about what you need from people, because you're not seeing them every day. You can't just pop in and check. Like, don't assume that they know that you need them to do XYZ and what you're expecting from them. Like, you have to be really deliberate about it and purposeful about it. And that's a level of candor that I think is lacking in a lot of organizations. I think that a lot of people are afraid of kind of having that candid, because I think that candor has been too often associated with, like, you don't have to be a jerk to be candid.
No.
It's like candor is just about like saying what you mean and meaning what you say versus, and you don't have to be a jerk in the delivery by that. So,
Right.
I don't know.
Well, it's funny because we're seeing that right now. And so I'm from Ohio. I'm from Cleveland, but not a Browns fan. I'm an Indians and a Cavs fan, but I'm not a Browns fan. I'm a Steelers fan. However, I really have enjoyed, as a communicator, Baker Mayfield and what he's done with the Browns. And not to take this down a sports tangent, but
it's okay. Browns are actually related to the water industry.
Okay.
Just ask Niords.
I started following them after our last conversation.
Yay!
Yeah. I love the Browns.
Well, yeah. So all we talk about is people wanting to speak their mind, right? Like you said, you can be candid without being a jerk. Mm-hmm. But the two aren't exclusive anymore, because in this example where Baker Mayfield spoke his mind or maybe gave an honest answer in an interview, which people don't even do anymore in sports, he got roasted for the next day for it. And I think it's going to be very interesting, because he's a perfect representation of maybe what a Gen Z probably is, where it's like, what? You asked me a question, I answered it.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to force us as managers and in these positions to really recalibrate the tone and the way we talk to not only employees, but potential employees.
Yeah.
As it's no longer about take an hour and present the strategy to me. If I can't understand the strategy in 10 minutes and what my role is and how I should be doing it, I'm probably not listening. And you have to engage people differently, maybe a little faster, maybe a little quicker with getting to the point and maybe being a little bit more candid. But it's going to really change the way I think management is working with this generation coming in.
Yeah.
Because engaged employees and internal communications has probably never been more important to an organization than it is right now.
Absolutely. And the emotional intelligence that comes with that. And I mean, I love to your point that yes, like sometimes people are taken aback when someone gives an honest answer, but it's just learning the emotional intelligence of being able to listen to that thing, listen to something objectively and not take it so personally and see like, okay, but again, like if you deliver it in a way that isn't unkind or hurtful or something, along that lines, it's just, there's a lot of we work in a hard skill industry that is trying to function in a soft skill world. And I feel like if we don't work much harder to strengthen those skills, like it kind of scares me.
Yeah. Well, and especially in B2B, you can have that direct tone. We do a lot of work with B2B clients. You can have a very direct tone, very direct persona and get away with it because it's more of a tech field and people want to hear that from engineers. But here's the hard part. Teaching engineers the soft skills, it's okay. We're not asking them to change how they talk. That's actually why we like what they're saying and doing. But it's actually getting them to be maybe more nurturing or empathetic or compassionate to the person they are talking to. Like, they need your help for a reason. They're asking these questions for a reason. How you deliver it, you can say what you want, but how you deliver it, how you follow up and nurture is a skill that they don't necessarily have. So it's how do you blend those two things?
Yeah. How do you talk human to humans? Like essentially that's our audience, or that's our user. They're humans. They just want a human answer.
Yes. Right.
But another tangent. So sorry. Like, say I knew this was going to happen. I was like,
I know.
So many
you have
things
to break it into two parts.
I know. Oh, there'll be more. Trust me. But getting back to this idea of employee retention and just the huge role that communication plays in that. We've got a lot of challenges, not just in water, but I think in the communication landscape at large. So what are some ways that you feel from an internal perspective that we're playing catch up?
Yeah, so we talk a lot about this in internal communications, and that's a big shift that our business has made in terms of who we're giving this presentation to, which is refreshing both for us and our clients, because a lot of times it's marketing communication professionals. We're actually giving this presentation, on internal communications to C-level, to HR, to people outside of traditional communication roles. So it's hard for them to hear some of the things that we're talking about when we get into it. Like, no, we're doing a good job. We're communicating just fine. It's like, okay, well, let's see how well we're doing. But those areas that I think that they're playing catch up is, some that I feature in the internal comms piece is the way that they're communicating with employees. The methods are pretty outdated. Not necessarily, people think like, well, we do email, we do this, we do that. When in reality, you might think that you're doing a good job by sending emails, or you might think you're doing a good job by updating message boards, but maybe employees don't see that message board. Maybe they don't open those emails because the employees you're talking to are on a manufacturing floor. So those methods need to be innovated. The current communication that you need to get through, there's too much. That's another way. I think we've fallen prey to this. Employees, total transparency means everything, when in reality it means the important things. So it's like we're force feeding everything to people, and it's like, how do you delineate between what's important and what's not? And that gets lost if people just tune it out. And that's my next point. There's no prioritization around what's coming through. So it's like, I got that email just as easily as I got that other email, but I don't know which one I should be reading. So I didn't read either one of them.
Oh boy.
Which is completely defeating the whole purpose. There's no customizable communication, especially when you consider there's 5 active generations in the workforce today. People feel, not only to the generation that they're in, it's like, well, I didn't want to read that because I don't normally read that. Or you actually sent what? You sent something to my home. I'm supposed to read the mail. What are you talking about? So it feels very like, it's just corporate speak. And then the last one ties nicely into the whole thing about Gen Z, is looking at two-way communication, where they want to have a conversation versus being told or talked to, because they associate it with a chance to be heard. And that's really hard today. It's funny because a couple of the conversations I've had recently with clients and potential clients are around how to humanize the C-suite a little bit, to your previous point. And the one way they're trying to do it is through more small group meetings, more town halls, things like that. And they're saying, well, we thought that would work, but it's not having the return that we thought. And this is why. The employees like the two-way communication, but they want two-way communication where they actually have a chance to contribute and talk back. Versus like, well, I'm not going to raise my hand in this room of 10 or 12 people, or 25 or 30 people. So that's really an area that's falling behind, that I think when you think of how a C-level, somebody in the C-suite is spending their time, really is going to have to reprioritize how they spend their time talking to employees on a daily basis.
Yeah, absolutely. And while we were at NACWA, we got to speak to the director at Newater in Green Bay. His name is Tom Sigmund, and he talked about how that very thing that people wanted to hear from him more as a director. So he started these, I think, like weekly blogs, called maybe monthly, I don't know, called Tom's Thoughts, where he just kind of, this is what's been on his mind. This is what he's been thinking about. This is what he's, keeping him up at night. But then he also started doing these very informal lunch meetings where it wasn't like you have to show up, but it was like, he's going to be there. And if you want to come chat about something, or, that was your opportunity to have some face-to-face time and actually engage back and forth with your director.
Even went into, the cafeteria area or the break room and just ate lunch there. And, I can remember when I was in the city, we used to have this older building that, everyone came and ate together.
Yeah.
All levels. And when we physically moved from the old building to this brand new shiny building, it kind of segmented things. And the carpet folks, which were, the directors, I was one of them. We were all guilty of it. We always end up eating in our own office.
Yeah.
And how much that changed the culture immediately. And it's like, oh, why didn't we just pick up and go back to the break room like we all did?
Right.
We do. Yeah.
Yeah. It happens a lot. I'm guilty of the same thing. And the problem is I need to force myself. That's actually really good to say that. I need to force myself to reconsider that, because most of the time people shut their door and eat, because it's like, I want 10 minutes to eat and not be seen. That's kind of my thing, is it? We could have a whole other podcast on me and eating and all my problems with business lunches.
Oh my gosh, let's do it.
I wrote a blog on business lunch etiquette.
Oh my God.
It's like totally. The Seinfeld moment.
Next, yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, so your point is a good one. You need to be out. And sometimes you don't want to say force yourself, because it's like, oh, you had to force yourself to talk to me. It's like, no, not that. It's, I need to remind myself that something I'm doing and maybe not thinking is a big deal is actually a big deal.
It's a big deal.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, successful internal comms, we believe, really comes from living by your core values and demonstrating and communicating in ways that demonstrate you valuing your people. So this is easy to say, but how do we make this a reality? And I want to know, in your opinion, what are the 5 components of an internal communications program?
Well, the good news is, I think a lot of companies are doing some of these. Mm-hmm. They would tell you oh yeah, we have a good internal comms program. And then they would miss maybe a couple of these, right?
Yeah.
And this is by no means, the be all end all, but from my perspective, especially in B2B, when looking at internal communication, there are 5 critical elements. One's the employee experience. We've talked a lot about Gen Z today and what they experience. That differs from other generations, but that experience, what greets them when they come in, day one on the job, how you communicate with them, their feeling, what their family thinks. If you were to call my family, that's a bad example because I worked for 20 years, but they would give you a pretty accurate review of akhia. And I love when I see family members liking akhia's Facebook posts, and because that means they're so proud of their kid. And they know the company they work at's cool. So that's an employee experience that I like. Employee engagement, we spend a ton of time on. You have to have an engagement program that probably is driven by HR. I think the mistake a lot of times people make is thinking it needs to come from marketing or from a C-level specific person. Trust HR, especially in this time that we're in right now. This is what they're trained for. Training and development, and really making sure that those training programs are in place, even if it's just even if you only have 2 things you do a year. That's something that's more than 0 things you do a year. So having that to our professional development.
Yeah. Can I say something to that? Yeah. I want to add, when I worked for the city, we kind of took on our own employee engagement program. And just listening to what you're just saying, it really just hit me hard. I shouldn't have done that, because I wish that I would have turned to our HR, because in our world, it then became well, that group of people didn't like what we did last time, and that group of people did. So if I do that again, or if we do that later on, like it just kind of created more drama or issues amongst the employees, because here I'm choosing what we're doing, or we're together choosing what the whole department is doing for team building or engagement or whatever it is. And it's obviously, rubbing some people the wrong way, when I could have just handed this over to a kind of a third party, the HR person, and spoke to them about, this is what I'd like to see the department going in the direction of, and letting them do what they're doing best,
Right. Well,
so many lessons learned.
So my COO and I meet with our HR team once a quarter. And I think probably 2 years ago, if you would have told people that, they'd be like, oh, HR's telling on us, or they're talking about stuff that you would assume people think about. Well, now they know they're actually holding us accountable, because we're talking about our review program. We talk about are we delivering on some of the things we've talked about in terms of being progressive and ahead of the curve, and flexible workforce and balance days and things like that. So it's really putting us in a position of accountability, and it's important because you lose track of some of those things in the position you're in, because you don't think about it every day.
Yeah.
Well, that actually goes to the fourth component, which is HR. I think a lot of times HR is it's sort of like maybe the way it used to operate,
the principal's office.
Exactly, forms, paper pushing, and stuff like that. It is so much. It is not that at all.
Yeah.
And today I was reading recently about how HR has to really take on a new role today. Like they need to be a wellness counselor, a financial counselor, an advisor, things, especially with people coming into the workforce that they don't know how to do some of these things. Mm-hmm. Their role has completely changed. And it's going to change again. But if you don't have an HR strategy and an HR lead in place to spearhead that, you're going to be behind. And then finally, is crisis communications. And I think people think crisis is bad, which of course it is. I probably should change that to like proactive communications. I think the crisis is the one that resonates. Because today, literally anything could happen. So scenario planning, messaging, making sure you have your right spokesperson, media trained, and all those bases covered is it's always been critical, but today you don't have an opportunity to react at all. So you have to have it in place.
Absolutely.
We learned that you have 6 minutes in a previous interview to react
online
before someone else has that story out.
Yep.
And so it's super important. And yes, I don't want to say cure to crisis communication, but you definitely need proactive communication to have a proper crisis communication.
Yeah.
Yes.
If you don't have trust built ahead of time, then you're starting from square one in the midst of a crisis.
Oh yeah. And we do a lot of crisis communication, and I think people think there's a secret sauce or recipe, and reality is the very first session is just basically sitting down and going through what's in existence and uncovering, like you said, do you have anybody that can mobilize quickly? Do you have any prepared messaging? Those kinds of things. A lot of times they don't. It's not because they did it poorly, just because they grew as a business and never really had to be in that position before. So it's just a growing pain that sometimes people ignore.
Agree 100%. So I think all of those are 5 like key areas that I think will make for a great internal comms program. And I like that you talk about where you start from square one, because that kind of makes me think about a lot of people when they start from square one, they're brainstorming. And in one of the last conversations that we talked about, we talked about brainstorming, and something that you said really stuck with me. And you said that brainstorming has been replaced by education, and I love that. So can you dive a little bit more into what you meant when you said that?
Yeah, well, I told you, I think what we talked is, so brainstorming just annoys me, because not because I don't like it, but because it doesn't mean the same thing it used to. It's hard to facilitate and lead brainstorming sessions because our attention spans are different. People have a different view of meetings. And a lot of times our clients, they're so busy with other things, their day job, so to speak. And they'll tell you right up front, we're wearing so many hats. So what we're expected to do and what we want to do is actually elevate them, not only with ideas, but also educate them on how those are applied and used. So while it used to be like, hey, let's get together and brainstorm, now it's let's get together and hear what you guys think, or hear what you think we should be doing. And so we're coming in with an education around it. We might say, like, here's 3 big ideas for you to consider. But as part of that, we're going to go a little bit deeper into why we recommended those, how to apply them. So I think the days of like an idea are gone, because if you have somebody in a room, you need to not only sell them on the idea, but get their approval and show them how to get started all at the same time. So it's turned into this educational process that we've actually, even in the last year, built into our discovery, is an understanding of the education that we're going to bring to our clients, so they know kind of the way we want to work, which always resonates, because people are like, oh, so you're going to handle that. You're going to take care of that. You're not going to give me an idea, then we have to run with it, which of course any good agency would say, like, we'll take that off your hands anyway. But I think taking it and advancing it a few steps is kind of where we're going. So yeah, the days of brainstorming with like fun brainstorming icebreakers and toys and like pizza parties are unfortunately gone, I think.
Those are, yeah.
Well, I think we've
evolved into, like us personally have evolved into more of the design thinking and the different tactics and things that you use to do that. So while we still call them icebreakers, they're kind of like when you used to go into elementary school and you would sit down and there'd be a math problem on the board, and it would just kind of get your brain thinking and going. Yeah. You know, that's the kind of icebreakers I like, is let's get them get their brain moving.
Yeah,
I need their mouth moving with pizza. Yeah. I need their brain moving.
They have a reason.
Bring it into you can actually bring it into the session. We'll still do some of those just as a way to show them like different thinking and stuff like that. But just using that and then being like, okay, where do we go now? Right. Yeah, you're going to have clients sitting there going, what are we doing? What are we paying for?
Oh, we've had that.
Yeah.
What are we doing?
Yeah. Well, then there's a reason, but there's a method to all the madness. But I also think that people go into what they call quote unquote brainstorm sessions with the wrong idea, where they think, not like the wrong idea, but like most people are like, oh, we're going to have a brainstorm session. That means we're going to like talk through these different things or this challenge that we have. And at the end of this conversation, we're going to have the most brilliant idea ever. And that's really not how it works.
Hours, yeah.
That's really like how you get the mind going. And then it's when you leave and you start making connections with like the outside world, that's like kind of when that creativity has an opportunity to strike, because you start seeing it's fresh on the brain, and then you start like making connections in new ways and things like that, and then come back and regroup and talk about, well, like what came to your mind after that. You know, it's like this process. It's not just like this magical unicorn that you're going to come into this meeting and, you know, an hour, 2 hours, 4 hours later, you're going to walk out with this like innovative, world-changing idea. Like it's process, you know?
Yeah. And that's, and like even that, educating them on what the expectation is.
Yeah.
It's just like you said earlier, it all comes down to, are you a good communicator or not?
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you define the expectation? Can you simplify what it is we're supposed to be doing? Do I understand what it is we're doing and why we're doing it, my role in it? It all really comes down to that. So yeah, and his expectations are higher, and it's harder today because of all the noise and clutter, and our attention spans are completely shot to hell.
Yeah, and it's true. We do have tiny attention spans.
Yes,
goldfish. So super fun chat. Can't wait to have more. There will be more in the future, but we got a lightning round that we're going to wrap up with.
Okay. Are you ready for this?
I think so.
Dun, 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 dun. I need some like music whenever we.
No,
you can like throw some in. I need to start doing that then.
All right.
Okay. What's your favorite book right now that you can recommend to us?
So I just actually looked up the author because I had a blank. But the book I'm obsessed with and is on my desk is The Disney Way.
Love it.
If you have read it or haven't read it, it's by Bill Capotegill and Lynn Jackson, but it's the 3rd edition. This is like morphed over time. So yeah, the book is awesome.
I actually went through a Disney Institute, which was really cool, and I recommend that to anyone. It was just like a one-day workshop with some Disney folks, and it was just amazing. I mean, of course, like it's Disney.
Well, that's all. And I'm a huge Disney fan anyway, so there's so much like behind the scenes stuff in that book.
So much.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Awesome.
Their brainstorm sessions are legit.
Now if you're Disney, you can brainstorm.
Yeah. Y'all got this. Okay. What is something that you do every day that drives your productivity?
I have it's nothing exciting, but I have an industry feed on TweetDeck where I just basically go through all the different, and it's made up of things you would expect to find on it, like Mashable, but it's also like some HR blogs and HR personalities, and just try to get a very different perspective of communications. And then I also go through LinkedIn because I have a pretty good network of people that don't mind me bugging them. So I kind of round robin and go through like, what's up when we're getting together? What'd you learn today? What's new?
I love that.
And
I'm waiting for my question. Yeah.
I'll add you in. You're, I'm taking it slowly. I put you on the mailing list.
You did.
Next, I'm going to start bugging you on LinkedIn.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
I like it.
Hey, yeah. Feel free.
Yeah.
Cool. No, I like that. I like using social media as a way to, and you can set things up like that where you see what you want to see, and you don't have to like go scrolling and look for it. So that's a great tip. Okay, so in our line of business, we were dealing with behavior change, and so sometimes we would have people tell us that what difference does it make if I make this change? I'm just one person. It's not like I'm going to change the world or anything. And we wholeheartedly disagree because we think that change can be contagious, and you never know what something you do could inspire in others. So what's the one call to action that you're most passionate about that you believe could ultimately change the world?
So the easy answer is like, don't be a jerk.
Yeah.
Except that's super hard for people.
Apparently.
Right. It's just too easy of an answer, right? Or it's like you said earlier, you don't have to be nice. Or,
kindness.
Just respect each other. But that's, it's like kind of saying that you want to cure world hunger. But no, I would say it's communication. I think people get lost in the fact that communication is this big process and a really hard thing to do, when in reality it's not. And I try to live that at work, and I've not always succeeded, so I'm not saying I follow that advice all the time. And I am married, which means I'm a terrible communicator. Husbands just are. Sorry. That's probably going to get me in trouble with the ASA, the new gender stereotyping police that's out there. Sorry, husbands that are good communicators. But the other is looking at this from just trying to, when you say simplify communication, and this is the last thing I'll say, I had a professor in college that used to be a newspaper editor, and he said, write like you talk. And I was like, how about talk like you talk?
Yeah.
So my writing's not like, it's not fancy. It's not like people use extra words in it. Like at this moment, the current moment, it's like, no, you wouldn't say that if you're talking to somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, how do you talk? Just talk, just write. We get lost, I think, sometimes in trying to sound smart when you don't have to. You can just communicate.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying that, Ben.
Yeah.
I appreciate that on so many different angles. So thank you.
You're welcome.
But I mean, for real, like I have enjoyed your newsletter thus far.
Yes.
Can't wait to see what conversations you're starting on LinkedIn. And I definitely see some future conversations coming, because I think that one thing that really resonated with me as we were talking is I think that we're kindred spirits in many ways. Especially, I didn't even get to ask you about the whole like keeping communication simple thing. So I'm glad that you kind of touched on that a little bit, because we're big believers of that as well. But I definitely wanted to thank you for spending some time with us today, and we appreciate that.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you guys. I have been looking forward to this, and I apologize. I think I blew through our time limit and Ants got really long-winded, but hopefully it was productive and people enjoy it.
It's totally
Hey, but before we go, you have your own podcast. I want you to give a shout out to that. So where can people find you on yours?
Oh yeah. So Ben Thinking season 1 was earlier this year, and it was just basically 5 interviews with 5 people I found interesting over my career that have done different things in communications. And that's on akhia. That's off of akhia.com on our Think About It section, which is our blogs and podcasts and infographics, just basically industry info. And I'm getting ready to sketch out season 2, which is, you'll find this interesting, is going to be on generations.
Ooh.
Because this has been such a hot topic. And I figured, because there's 5 active generations, what I'm going to do is 1 episode with each generation.
Nice.
Yes.
So I'm Gen Z. I mean, let's face it, Gen Z is going to be the most interesting because I'll probably have like some 9-year-olds in the mix. But I think it'll be good just to get different perspective, and I'll ask kind of the same questions as I go through. So I'll probably start production on that in the fall.
Very
love
cool.
it.
I love
yes.
that idea.
Yeah.
Wait.
So check that out. Check out their website. Sign up for their newsletter. It's been incredibly interesting to me. So check it out. So thanks again, Ben.
Yeah, guys. Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.